Stop shrinking yourself. I need to say that to you before anything else today because it is the most important thing I am going to say, and I want it to land before you have time to deflect it or minimize it the way you minimize so many things about yourself. Stop making yourself smaller to fit into spaces that were never built for the full version of you. Stop swallowing your opinions in rooms where your opinion matters. Stop laughing at things that are not funny because silence would create tension. Stop agreeing when you disagree because disagreement feels too costly. Stop editing the real version of what you think and feel before it leaves your mouth so that what comes out is a softer, more acceptable version that no one will push back on. Stop it. I made you the way I made you, and I did not intend for you to spend your life apologizing for it. You have been doing this for so long that it has become invisible to you. You do not even notice anymore when you are doing it. The editing happens automatically before the words have even fully formed. Someone asks what you think, and before the thought finishes traveling from your heart to your mouth, it has already been filtered through the question of how this will land, and will this cause conflict, and what will they think of me, and is this worth the discomfort? And by the time the words actually come out, they are a watered-down version of what you actually think, and you walk away from that conversation feeling vaguely hollow without being entirely sure why. I know why. Because you were not there. A managed version of you was there, but the real you was not. I want to trace this back to where it started because it did not start with you. You were not born knowing how to make yourself small. You learned it. At some point in your life, your full expression was met with a response that taught you it was not safe to be fully yourself. Maybe it was a parent who needed you to be quieter, or less intense, or more agreeable. Maybe it was a peer group that made it clear that being different was costly. Maybe it was a relationship where your boundaries were consistently overridden until you stopped having them. Maybe it was a series of small moments across many years that collectively communicated the same message, that the full version of you was too much, too loud, too sensitive, too opinionated, too needy, too different, too much. And you took that message in, and you believed it, and you built your entire strategy for surviving in the world around the project of becoming less of what got the negative response, and you got good at it. You became genuinely skilled at reading the room and adjusting your presentation accordingly. You learned which version of yourself was most acceptable in which setting. You learned to modulate your enthusiasm so it did not make others uncomfortable. You learned to hold back your grief so it did not burden people who were not equipped to hold it. You learned to contain your joy so it did not seem like showing off. You learned to have opinions quietly instead of out loud. And people around you probably described you as easy to be around and low maintenance and considerate. And you accepted those descriptions as compliments even though deep underneath them you knew that what they were actually describing was your absence. I want to talk about the exhaustion of that project, the constant self-monitoring it requires. You can never fully relax in social settings because relaxing would mean the guard coming down, and the guard coming down might mean the real version of you showing up, and you are not sure the real version of you is welcome. So you spend enormous amounts of energy in every interaction managing your presentation, monitoring how you are being received, adjusting in real time based on the feedback you are reading from the faces and body language and responses around you. That is an exhausting way to move through the world. It is the equivalent of running a performance constantly, and you have been running it for so long that you barely remember what it feels like to simply exist in a room without performing. I want to talk about the loneliness that lives inside of this way of living. Because the painful irony of people pleasing is that the more successful you are at it, the lonelier you become. When everyone around you is responding positively to a version of you that you carefully constructed for their comfort, you have no way of knowing whether they would respond positively to the real version. And the fear that they would not is exactly what keeps the real version hidden. So you are surrounded by people who like you and yet profoundly alone, because what they like is not fully you. The closeness you want is the kind where the real version of you is known and accepted. But that kind of closeness requires risk, and risk requires showing the real version, and showing the real version feels too dangerous. And so the loneliness continues inside the crowd. I want to speak to the relationships you have built entirely on the managed version of yourself. Friendships where the other person has never encountered your actual opinions or your real feelings or the depth of your actual personality. Relationships where you have been so focused on being what the other person needed that you have no idea whether they are actually compatible with who you really are. These relationships are not without value. The care you have given in them was real, even if it was not accompanied by full self-disclosure. But I want to ask you something about them. What would happen to those relationships if you began to show up more fully? Some of them would deepen. Some of them would reveal incompatibilities that were always there but hidden. And both of those outcomes are better than the current one, which is sustaining closeness with people who have never actually fully met you. I want to speak to the specific way you minimize your gifts. Not just your personality, but the actual abilities and capacities I placed in you. You deflect compliments about them. You diminish them in conversation before someone else can. You compare them unfavorably to what others do and find your version lacking. You hold back from using them in situations where they are needed because the visibility of using them makes you uncomfortable. You have decided that it is safer to underperform than to perform at the level you are actually capable of and risk the attention or the expectation or the criticism that might follow. And in the process, you have been depriving the people around you of something I specifically made you to offer them. Your gift was never just for you. It was given to you for others. And your reluctance to let it be seen is not humility. It is fear dressed up as humility. I want to talk about the difference between genuine humility and the self-erasure that has been masquerading as humility in your life. Genuine humility says, I have gifts and abilities that I did not earn, and I will use them in service of purposes greater than my own advancement. Self-erasure says, I will hide my gifts and abilities so that no one can accuse me of thinking too highly of myself. One of those postures produces fruit in the world. The other produces nothing except the private grief of a life unlived at its full capacity. I did not make you to produce nothing. I made you to produce the specific fruit that only the combination of your personality and your gifts and your history and your perspective can produce. No one else in the world can produce exactly what you can produce. And when you hide yourself, you are hiding something that the world cannot get from anyone else. I want to speak to the people-pleasing that happens in your closest relationships, the way you consistently prioritize what the other person wants without ever naming what you want, the way you absorb their preferences and organize your choices around them until you have gradually lost track of what you actually prefer, the way you swallow your hurt feelings to avoid conflict so consistently that you are not even sure anymore when something has genuinely hurt you, the way you take the smaller portion, the less comfortable seat, the less convenient option, automatically without even considering that you are allowed to sometimes take the better thing. These small, continuous acts of self-minimization add up over time into a life where your own needs and preferences have been systematically subordinated to everyone else's. And then you wonder why you feel invisible even in your most intimate relationships. You feel invisible because you have made yourself invisible by removing yourself from the equation at every decision point. I want to speak to the moment you are in right now reading this. I want to ask you a question that you do not have to answer out loud, but that I want you to sit with honestly. When is the last time you expressed a genuine opinion that you knew might not be received well and expressed it anyway? When is the last time you said no to something without apologizing for the no, or over-explaining the no, or softening the no into something that was barely a no at all? When is the last time you let someone see you cry, or be angry, or be confused without immediately managing their response to your emotion? When is the last time you told someone something true about yourself that you had been protecting? If the honest answer to those questions is a long time, or you cannot remember, then I want to offer you that information as data, not condemnation, data. Evidence of how deeply the project of self-management has run in your life and how much of you has been kept in hiding as a result. I want to speak to the fear that is behind all of this because the shrinking always has a fear underneath it. The specific fear varies from person to person. For some of you, the fear is rejection. If people see the real version of me, they will decide they do not want it, and they will leave. For some of you, the fear is conflict. If I express my actual opinion or my actual need, it will cause a rupture in the relationship that I will not be able to repair. For some of you, the fear is envy. If I let my gifts be seen fully, people will resent me for it, and the cost of that resentment will be greater than the benefit of being seen. For some of you, the fear is a deep-seated belief that the real version of you is fundamentally unacceptable in some way you cannot fully name. That there is something wrong with you at a core level that full visibility would expose. I want to address that last fear specifically because it is the one that runs the deepest and causes the most damage. There is nothing fundamentally wrong with who you are. I made you. I made every specific thing about you that you have been hiding and managing and minimizing. The intensity of your feelings was not a manufacturing defect. The directness of your thoughts was not a character flaw to be corrected. The size of your dreams was not arrogance to be subdued. The sensitivity of your spirit was not weakness to be ashamed of. The complexity of your inner world was not something too much for relationships to hold. These are the specific features of who I made you to be, and every one of them has a purpose in the story I am telling through your life. The world told you they were problems. I am telling you they are gifts. The world taught you to hide them. I am asking you to bring them back out. I want to speak to those of you who grew up in environments where being yourself had genuine consequences, where your authentic expression was punished or ridiculed or simply ignored until it withered. I am not minimizing what you learned in those environments. The lesson was painful, but it was real at the time. Hiding yourself was genuinely protective in that context. What I want you to consider is whether you are still operating the protective strategy in a context that no longer requires it. You are not living in that original environment anymore. The people around you now are not necessarily the same as the people who trained you to hide. And even if some of them are the same, you are not the same. You have more agency now than you did then. The strategies that kept you safe in childhood may be costing you connection and authenticity in adulthood, and the update is available to you. I want to speak to the specific way you handle your own emotions in front of other people. You have learned to be a very managed emoter. You let a controlled amount of feeling show, and you contain the rest. You give people the edited version of your emotional experience, and you process the full version alone afterward. I understand why you developed this. Full emotional expression has probably not always been received well in your history. But I want to gently point out what this pattern costs you in terms of connection. The people who are closest to you can sense that there is more than what you are showing, and the gap between what they sense and what you are showing creates a subtle distance. Real intimacy is built not on managed presentations, but on the risk of full presence. I am not asking you to empty your emotional experience onto everyone you encounter. I am asking you to consider allowing the people who have earned trust to see more of the full picture. I want to speak to those of you who have become so accustomed to the role of the strong one that you have forgotten how to receive help. You are the one who holds everyone else. You are the one people call when they need support. You are good at helping, and you find purpose in it, and that is genuinely beautiful. But you have also developed an allergy to being on the receiving end, because receiving requires a kind of vulnerability that the role of helper does not. Being the one who needs help means acknowledging that you are not sufficient in yourself, and that acknowledgement feels threatening to the identity you have built around your strength. But here is the truth. Allowing yourself to receive is not weakness. It is the completion of a cycle. You give, and then you must also receive, or the giving eventually depletes you entirely. I want to speak to those of you who use humor as a shield, who have discovered that making people laugh is a reliable way to be loved without being known. You can be in a room full of people laughing with you and remain completely hidden because the laughter is always directed at the performance, not at the person. Humor is genuinely one of your gifts. I am not asking you to stop being funny. I am asking you to consider letting people see what is behind the humor sometimes. Let someone see you without the performance running. Let someone encounter the quieter, truer version of you that does not have a punchline. The real version of you is just as lovable as the performing version. More so, actually, because it is real. I want to speak to those of you who have trained yourself to need very little so that you are never in the position of asking for too much. You have compressed your needs down to a manageable minimum, and you tell yourself you are fine with less when in reality, you have simply gotten very good at not knowing what you need anymore, because knowing would require asking, and asking feels too vulnerable. Your needs are not an imposition. They are part of being human. The person who has no needs is not enlightened. They are disconnected from themselves. Reconnecting with what you actually need is not selfishness. It is the beginning of the kind of honest self-knowledge that allows genuine relationship. I want to speak to the version of you that exists in the quiet moments when the performance is down, late at night or in the early morning before the day begins and the managing starts. In that quiet, you sometimes catch a glimpse of who you actually are beneath all the managing. And there is something in that glimpse that is more alive than what gets shown in public. I want more of that version to have room in your daily life, not just in the private, quiet moments. I want the you that exists in the quiet to begin to take up more space in the rooms you walk into. Not all at once, not recklessly, but intentionally, one honest expression at a time, one unedited opinion at a time, one boundary held without apology at a time. I want to speak to the grief that is going to come as part of this process. Because when you begin to be more genuinely yourself, some relationships will respond and some will not. Some people have been bonded to the managed version of you, and when the real version begins to appear, it will be unfamiliar to them, and some of them will prefer the managed version. That is painful information to receive about a relationship. The grief of discovering that someone preferred the performance over the person is real, but it is also clarifying. And clarity about which relationships can hold the real you is one of the most valuable things you can have as you move forward. I want to speak to what is waiting for you on the other side of this, on the other side of the decision to stop shrinking. The relationships that are built on the full version of you rather than the managed version. The friendships where you can say what you actually think without calculating first. The sense of home in your own skin that comes from not constantly fighting against the design I put in you. The energy that is released when you stop spending it on management and can redirect it toward actual living. The creative and generative force that becomes available when you stop suppressing it. The surprising discovery that the thing you thought was too much for people to handle is actually the specific thing that certain people have been waiting to encounter. You were not too much for everyone. You were too much for the wrong people. And the right people are still out there and they cannot find you while you are hiding. I am asking you to come out of hiding, not all at once. I understand the fear and I am not dismissing it, but I am asking you to begin one small act of genuine self-expression today. One moment where you let what is real come out instead of the managed version. One relationship where you allow a little more of the actual you to be seen. Begin there and watch what happens. Not with everyone, just with someone, just once. And let that be the first step back toward the full and unhidden version of yourself that I created and that I am still asking to see more of. You were not made to be a smaller version of yourself for the comfort of people who were not equipped to hold your full size. You were made to be exactly what I made you to be in the full expression of it. And the world that is waiting for you outside of the hiding is larger and more genuinely connected and more fully alive than the world you have been inhabiting in the managed version. Come out, my child. I made you remarkable, and I want the world to see what I made. I want to stay with you a little longer on this because I know there are layers of the shrinking that we have not fully addressed yet, and I want to reach all of them before I let you go. I want to speak to the way you handle disagreement, not conflict exactly, but simple disagreement. A moment where someone states something as fact that you know to be incomplete or inaccurate or that you simply see differently. And you feel the opinion forming clearly in your mind, and then you watch yourself let it go without voicing it because the math of the moment said it was not worth it. And maybe sometimes that is the right call. Not every passing disagreement needs to be a conversation, but I want to ask you whether you are making a genuine judgment about which disagreements are worth voicing, or whether you have a blanket policy of silence, because voicing disagreement feels categorically unsafe. Because if it is the latter, then you are not having any real conversations at all. You are having a series of performances that look like conversations. Over time, the people in your life are not actually knowing what you think about anything significant. I want to speak to the way you receive criticism versus the way you receive praise. I suspect that criticism lands with full force, while praise tends to slide off. Someone says something negative about you, and it takes up residence in your mind and plays on repeat for days. Someone says something genuinely affirming, and you deflect it immediately or minimize it or explain it away before it has a chance to settle. There is an asymmetry there that is worth examining. The asymmetry says that the negative information feels more credible than the positive information, which means that at some level you believe the negative assessments are getting closer to the truth of who you are than the positive ones. And that belief is not accurate. You are not more truly known by your critics than by the people who genuinely see and affirm you. But as long as you treat critical voices as the most reliable source of information about your worth, the project of shrinking will continue, because the critical voices always want you smaller. I want to speak to those of you who are exceptionally attuned to other people's emotional states and who spend enormous energy in any given interaction tracking what the people around you are feeling and adjusting your behavior accordingly to keep everyone as comfortable as possible. This attunement is a gift. The ability to read a room and sense what people need is genuinely valuable, and I put it in you deliberately. But it has been overextended into a compulsive caretaking of everyone else's emotional state at the expense of your own. You are so focused on managing how other people feel that you have no bandwidth left to track how you feel. And over time, the loss of contact with your own inner experience leaves you feeling hollow and directionless, because your internal compass has been outsourced to the people around you. Your own feelings are just as valid as everyone else's, and they deserve the same attention you give to others. I want to speak to those of you who apologize constantly, who have turned the apology into a preemptive strike against rejection. If I apologize before anyone has a chance to be upset, then maybe the upset will not come. If I make myself small and sorry enough, then maybe no one will decide to leave. I know you have probably been told you apologize too much, and you have probably noticed it yourself, but the noticing has not been enough to stop it, because apologizing is not about manners, it is about survival. It developed as a way of managing a threat. And until the underlying threat belief is addressed, the apologizing will continue, even when you know consciously that there is nothing to apologize for. I want to speak to those of you who have silenced a calling or a dream because expressing it out loud felt too vulnerable. A vision for what you wanted your life to look like that you have kept to yourself because speaking it would mean it could be dismissed or doubted or criticized, and that risk felt greater than the cost of keeping it hidden. I want to tell you something about kept hidden dreams. They do not disappear, but they do change. They can become a source of quiet grief rather than quiet hope. They can become something you mourn in private rather than something you pursue. The dream you are keeping hidden is worth the risk of being seen, not to every person, but to the right ones. And I am the first right one. Tell me about it, out loud or in writing or in the private space of your own heart. Let it exist somewhere other than the locked interior room where you have been keeping it. I want to speak to those of you who have tried to make yourself more acceptable by changing the things about yourself that others found difficult. You tried to become less emotional because emotional was criticized. You tried to become more outgoing because quiet was interpreted as unfriendly. You tried to become less intense because intensity was labeled as too much. You tried to become more casual about things that mattered deeply to you because caring that much seemed embarrassing. And in the process of all that adjustment, you moved progressively further from the original design and progressively closer to a version of yourself that is more acceptable to others and less recognizable to yourself. I want to walk that back with you. Not all the growth and refinement you have done, but the parts where you changed something essential about yourself in order to earn approval you were never going to permanently secure by changing anyway. The people whose approval required you to be less yourself were never going to be satisfied with any version of you. I want to speak to the difference between adapting and disappearing. Adapting is healthy, adjusting your communication style for different relationships. Recognizing that different contexts call for different levels of formality or intimacy. Learning how to express yourself in ways that can be received by the people you are trying to reach. These are healthy forms of flexibility, and they do not require you to fundamentally alter who you are. Disappearing is something different. Disappearing is removing your actual perspective from the room, hiding your actual feelings from the conversation, suppressing your actual gifts from situations where they are needed. Adapting keeps you present while adjusting the expression. Disappearing removes you from the equation entirely. I have been watching you disappear from your own life, and I am asking you to come back. I want to speak to those of you who use business as another form of hiding, who fill every hour with activity and productivity and doing so that the uncomfortable experience of simply being with yourself does not have to happen. The business keeps the inner world at a manageable distance. It is harder to hear the grief or the longing or the honest questions about your life when you are always in motion. I understand the appeal of it. The inner world can feel overwhelming when you stop long enough to encounter it, but the inner world is also where the real you lives. And the real you needs the silence to be heard. Slow down enough to sit with yourself. What you find there may be harder than the noise, but it will also be more honest. And honesty with yourself is the foundation of every other kind of genuine expression. I want to speak to the specific grief of realizing that you have spent years being someone other than yourself. The grief of looking back and recognizing how much of your life was spent in the managed performance rather than in genuine living. That grief is real, and it deserves space. You are allowed to mourn the years in which the full version of you was not present in your own story. But I also want to prevent that grief from becoming its own trap. Grief over the managed years is valuable if it propels you toward more genuine living going forward. It becomes another form of hiding if you use it as a reason to stay stuck in the shame of having hidden for so long. The question that matters now is not how many years were spent in hiding. The question that matters is what you are going to do with the time that is still available. I want to speak to those of you who feel most yourself in one specific context and least yourself everywhere else. Maybe it is alone. Maybe it is with one specific person. Maybe it is in creative work or in nature or in a particular community. There is a version of you that exists in that specific context that is more free and more alive and more fully expressed than the version that operates everywhere else. I want to ask you to pay attention to what is different in that context. What does it permit that other contexts do not? What does it not require of you that others do? And then I want to ask you whether any of those conditions could be created in more areas of your life, not by forcing authenticity that is not yet safe in a given relationship, but by gradually expanding the conditions under which you allow the real version of yourself to show up. Here is what I want to leave with you. The world does not need a more acceptable version of you. The world does not benefit from a more managed, more edited, more minimized version of you. The world needs the specific and irreplaceable version of you that I designed before anything else existed. The world needs the opinions you have been keeping to yourself. The world needs the gifts you have been downplaying. The world needs the perspective that only your particular combination of personality and history and insight can offer. And the people in your life who are actually meant to be in your life need the real you in order to build the kind of closeness that makes the loneliness go away. I made you on purpose. Every specific thing about you that you have been managing and minimizing was put there by my design, not by mistake. The intensity was intentional. The sensitivity was intentional. The complexity was intentional. The particular way your mind works was intentional. The specific gifts that make you different from everyone around you were intentional. None of it was an accident, and none of it needs to be apologized for. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to have opinions. You are allowed to feel things fully. You are allowed to want what you want and say what you think and be who you actually are in the rooms you walk into, not at the expense of love and wisdom and appropriate context, but as the baseline of how you move through the world instead of the exception. Stop shrinking, my child. You were made for full size, and I want to see you living in it. One honest expression at a time, one unmanaged moment at a time, one room at a time. Begin today. I am with you in the risk of it, and I will be with you in whatever it produces. You are not too much. You have simply been in too small spaces, and those spaces were never your permanent address. Come home to yourself. I will be there when you arrive. There is one more thing I need to say to you, and I want you to hear it clearly before you close this out and return to your day. The shrinking has not just affected your relationships with other people. It has affected your relationship with me. The same instinct that edits the real you before it reaches the people around you has also been editing the real you before it reaches me. You bring me the acceptable version of your thoughts, the tidy version of your prayers, the version where you have already minimized the anger or the doubt or the bitterness or the raw need before you present it, because somewhere along the way you absorbed the idea that I prefer the managed version too, that I am more pleased with the polished prayer than the honest one, that I would rather hear you say fine than hear you say it is not fine at all, and I need you to show up for me in a way that feels different from how you have been showing up. I want to address that directly. I do not prefer the managed version. I never did. I am not more comfortable with the edited you. I am the one person in your entire existence who already knows the full unmanaged version, and I am asking for that version in your conversations with me. I can handle your anger. I can handle your doubt. I can handle the prayer that sounds less like a prayer and more like a list of grievances. I can handle the honest admission that you are not sure you trust me right now. I would rather have your honest distrust than your performed faith. Come to me the same way I am asking you to come to others. Real, unedited yourself. Because here is what I want you to understand about how I see you. I do not see the managed version when I look at you. I see straight through it to the real version underneath. I always have, and the real version is not less lovable than the managed one. It is more lovable because it is actually you. The managed version is a performance, and performances cannot be loved the way persons can. I do not love a performance. I love you, the actual you. The one underneath the management, the one who is tired of performing, the one who just wants to be known without consequence. That is the you I have been waiting for all along, not the acceptable version, the real one. Bring that version to me first. And then as the safety of being fully known by me becomes more real to you, let it gradually give you the courage to bring that version to the right people in your life as well. Let my acceptance of the real you become the foundation from which you eventually risk showing the real you to others. You are safe with me, all of you, the parts you are proud of and the parts you are ashamed of and the parts you are not sure what to do with yet. All of it is safe with me, and I will never use any of it against you. I will never throw it back at you in a moment of anger. I will never share it without your permission. I will never make you regret being honest. That is not who I am. So come to me fully. Start there. And let the practice of being fully yourself with me slowly expand outward into the rest of your life until one day you look around and realize that the managed version has become less automatic and the real version is showing up more, and the sky did not fall, and the people worth keeping are still there, and the ones who left were never capable of holding who you actually are anyway. I made you remarkable. I made you specific. I made you irreplaceable. And I made you to live fully in what I made you rather than in a smaller apologetic version of it. That is what I want for you, not a better performance, a real life, fully yours, fully expressed, fully alive. That is what is waiting for you when you stop shrinking, and I am going to be with you in every step of the walking toward it. Let me say one final thing. There will be days after this where the old instinct to shrink comes back strong, where a conversation goes sideways when you express the real version of yourself, and the part of you that says, "See, I told you it was not safe," will feel very loud. There will be moments where the vulnerability of being more fully seen produces a fear response, makes you want to retreat back into the managed version entirely. I am not promising you that the process of coming out of hiding will be smooth or without setbacks. I am promising you that it is worth it. And I am promising you that every time you choose the real version over the managed one, I am there cheering you forward, not critiquing how you did it. You will not do it perfectly. That is not the standard. The standard is honest and trying. And by that standard, you are already doing better than you think. Keep going. Keep showing up as yourself. Keep taking up the space I designed you to inhabit. The world is waiting for what only you can bring, and I am not willing to let you keep it hidden any longer. I love you too much for that.